Hello and welcome back to JMB Reviews. We are reviewing even more movies today
Movie
because we're
time.
still at the Palm Springs Film Festival
We are. We're
and
only halfway through
we're
too.
seeing so many movies.
We are. We're.
Um,
You've seen all these movies up till this one. This is the halfway mark. This movie
yeah,
is the halfway mark.
yeah.
So
And they were like asking the audience at one of the movies yesterday, like, "Oh, how many movies have you seen?" And we raised our hand after like it was like, "Have you
10.
seen more than 10?" And we raised our hand. And then they asked if someone had seen like 20, and someone raised their hand. So
Yeah,
as many as we're seeing, we're still not
we're
like
not.
that crazy.
Yeah, someone's seen double the amount of movies we have
Yeah,
so far, and I
yeah,
was like, that's crazy.
yeah. Um. Anyway, so we watched The Room Next Door.
The Room Next Door, which I actually really like that movie. You didn't really like
I
that
I,
movie.
I didn't think you really liked it. I thought you had issues with it too.
I do have a
Didn't you
little
give
bit
it
of
like a
issues.
4 out of 5 or something?
Yeah, it's not a perfect movie, but I still like
Um,
it. On the ballot, it
I
says really
thought it
like.
was fine. I gave it like 3 stars.
Yeah,
It was weird to me because it felt unfinished.
yeah, it did.
There were like 3 or 4 lines that were like really inspiring, really well written. I was like, wow, that's like great.
Hmm.
And then like there were points in the scripts where I was like, that was really bad.
Yeah,
Like there were parts in the script where I was like, that's not even how people speak.
yeah,
You sound like it was like childish. I was like, that's not it.
yeah,
And then there's like weird moments where it just decided to get like um preachy over like politics and stuff. I was
yeah.
like,
There was a whole thing about
not
global
even
change
not,
and
yeah,
Democrats and
climate change.
Republicans and like this whole like religious thing.
Not even disagreement with what they were saying, but just it was so obnoxiously preachy
Yeah,
that we both rolled our eyes because it was like, what are we doing
yeah.
here?
We
This
both were
isn't.
like, we agree with what you're saying, but also like, why do we need this in this
Yeah,
movie?
it was very preachy. It
Yeah,
was like, pause the movie, pause the story. Let me tell you about climate change for about a minute and a half.
literally.
It was just like, I was expecting him to like just start looking into the camera and then
Yeah,
like, for just 9 payments of 19.99, you too can save the polar bears. I was like, what are
literally.
we doing?
Well, and this movie is also about like death and stuff, not about like
Yeah, the
climate
climate change
change.
has nothing to do with the plot.
No.
But it's mentioned at least 3 times, and there's a whole minute and a half scene of him just talking about climate change
Yeah,
in detail.
yeah.
I'm just like, again, I'm not saying that it's not an issue.
No.
What I'm saying is that's not good writing.
Literally. I was just like, huh? There were several moments where it felt very like lazily done because I also hated the soundtrack for
The
this movie.
soundtrack was weird.
It was so bad.
It was like classical music mixed with like,
It
I
was
don't
like
know.
it was like very pretentiousy like drama music kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and it didn't match the mood ever.
Well, and it
There was
was
like not one scene where it matched the mood.
and it always came in and started playing when they would be doing this like super dramatic scene where
And then
they'd
it's
be
like,
like, yeah,
it's
there'd
like,
be
what are
like
you doing?
they would be making this super nice, amazing monologue that would be perfect with no music. But then you could be like, what the fuck are you saying? I can't hear you because of the score. I was just
This is
like,
just
what?
playing like maple leaves in the background. Dee, 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 dee,
Literally.
dee.
And she's like, I've become death, destroyer of worlds. And it's like, dee, 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 dee. And you're like, no, stop.
Yeah. And then like, what was up with like the first half? Like, at first I thought it was gonna be one of those movies where it's like her retelling her life story.
I also thought that too.
Because in the first half an hour, there's 2 flashbacks to random moments in her life. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's gonna be a flashback movie, which I was like, that's kind of.
Yeah, she was like telling the
I don't
story of
really love those types of
her
movies where it's
husband.
like them like telling the story of their lives and there's just like a bajillion flashbacks. I
So you
don't
didn't like Forrest Gump?
not as much. Um, but yeah, I thought
Controversial.
it was gonna be that, and then it wasn't at all, because they just stopped doing that after the first half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You get 2 flashbacks in 10 minutes, and then it never does it again.
Yeah.
And it didn't reveal anything either.
No.
It was just like how her husband died, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And then
That's it.
one of her war stories,
Oh
but
yeah.
it had nothing to do with her.
That was the moment when I thought they were gonna keep doing that and
Yeah,
like
because
tell her
it wasn't
story.
that important of a thing to flash back to. So I
No.
was like, oh, this is gonna be the whole movie.
That was just her talking to a guy that was like helping people, like a
Yeah.
refugee camp or something.
Yeah.
And then they like she's like, "Why are you still here?" And he's like, "'Cause I have to be." And then
Well,
she's like, "But why?"
the point was it was the first time that she'd ever invented something, or like added fiction to her war journalism.
Mm,
And it was like, okay.
yeah. And then yeah,
It
that
was
was
like she heard that two people were in love, and so she wrote their love story, but then never published it. And it's like, I wrote fiction that one time,
it, but never said anything. Like never
but
told
never
anyone.
published it.
Yeah.
It's like, glad we did this.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, okay. So the story is about like a woman who's like terminally ill from cancer.
Yeah, it's like
She
stage
has
3
like a
cancer.
month to live or something.
Yeah.
And
Or in like she has like a couple more months to live, but there's like this experimental treatment that would only prolong life. It wouldn't cure her. It would just
and it
give
wasn't
her like
working
5
anymore.
months. And
Yeah.
it wasn't it the first time she did it, it didn't work.
Yeah. So she was like, I don't want to just painfully die.
Yeah.
And so she finds a
Euthanasia.
yeah, a euthanasia pill on like the dark web,
Mhm.
so that she can decide when she goes.
Yeah.
And then she asks her friend, like, hey, can you be with me and be in the room next door? Title drop.
Yeah. Cuz she was going to do
Wow.
it like at night.
Yeah.
She was going to like
And so she wanted someone to be able to find her, and she also didn't want to be alone.
yeah. She wanted to go out knowing she had friends that would be there for her.
Yeah. So she has to ask this friend, are you willing to be in the room next door while I kill myself at some point in the next month? And she's
Yeah.
like, she doesn't want to, and then she finally decides, sure, I'll do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so it tries to be like this movie about, like, you know, this woman letting go. And I thought there were some effective scenes. I thought there were
Mhm.
some not very effective scenes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like
I
this
think
movie
if
just didn't know what it wanted to be.
I think if it was done really well and like the story I love the thought process and the story. Like
The premise is
the
great.
premise is amazing. I really liked the story they tried to make, but overall the making of the movie failed the movie
Yeah.
overall. Like if this had a better person making the movie, I feel like it would have been amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
It's definitely the type of movie that should have been one of my favorites, and it wasn't at all, and that's kind
Yeah.
of annoying.
Yeah. Because it never left you like feeling emotional about her at all. You never
No.
like at the end when it finally happens, you never are like, oh no.
I didn't like
know?
her that much as a person.
Yeah. You never really like connect with her character to feel like that intense like sadness feeling or any types of feeling at all through the movie. You're just like,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
So anyway, I didn't care for it. I think I gave it 2 or 3 stars. I was like, meh.
That's fair. I gave it 4 because I just love the premise and really I kind of related to her thought process a little bit. But yeah, overall it failed in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
I mean, I think it also walks a very fine line with like promoting like
Yeah,
suicide and stuff. I was like,
obviously.
I do think that there's times when a person ought to be able to choose, because there are some very painful deaths that people have to endure.
Cancer.
And I feel like I was okay with it in this depiction, but I was like, that's a very fine line of what you should be promoting.
Yeah.
I don't know, especially because she wasn't even in that much pain. Like, she had pain meds.
Yeah.
It was just that she didn't want to like lose all her like brain functions and stuff. I was
Yeah.
like,
For
okay,
me,
that's like on the line for me.
sure. For this specific instance, I thought back to the "We Live in Time" quote when Florence Pugh at the very beginning says like, "I don't want to invest into a time period where I'm either like I throw up all my guts and lose all my hair only to survive for another like 12
Yeah, but
months
that's not
over
the
like
same
8
thing
months."
though.
Yeah, I would say
That's should we continue chemotherapy or should I kill myself? Like that's
yeah.
not the same thing.
No, I know. It's still different, but I think they took that kind of idea and brought it to this kind of thought process in terms of
Yeah.
like she is going to die either way. It's either she does this experimental treatment that'll prolong a couple months of life that are miserable for her or not, you know?
Yeah, but it wasn't even do the treatment or not. It was should I kill myself or not?
Yeah, I know.
So,
Oh
yeah,
my
I
god,
don't know.
that was crazy.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, that's probably enough about that movie.
Yeah,
And then we watched Hard Truths,
Hard
which
Truth.
was another one that we had very differing opinions on.
We did. I
We've
again
seen
really like this
we've
one.
seen some very controversial movies in the
We
last 2 days.
have. It's unlike us too, because we're
Yeah.
very like similar
I mean,
minded
it's
on
happened
these.
before, but yeah.
Not this often.
Yeah. Um, this movie was really frustrating to me because it started off really good.
hmm
Like, it's basically about like this very, very, very grumpy, mean woman
hmm
who literally starts a fight with every single person she interacts with, which I thought was hilarious. Her
Yeah,
acting
she
was
was
great. The
hilarious.
writing was good. Like the
Yeah.
way that she could find an argument out of nothing, I was
Yeah.
like, this is so funny and so good. And that
hmm
was the first probably like what? I think it's an
It
hour and a
was
half
probably an
movie. I think it
hour.
was the first 30 minutes that she
I'd
was
say
actually
40.
yelling at people.
I'd say 40.
Maybe halfway through. I thought was funny and really well done. And then for me, the movie just completely lost steam. I've never seen a movie collapse as hard as this one did for me.
For me, I really enjoyed it, and I'll say the good things about why I like this movie, and maybe some of the things um, you might miss. But I kind of really liked it because it was for me. It was like her being like this mean, grumpy old person because she had been traumatized from like all these things that happened by her family when she was a kid or whatever. They never really specify in the movie like why she's traumatized, which is a style of doing things. I think it was
You could call it that, yeah.
I think it was like the drama version of like show don't tell kind of thing where it's um like in horror movies it's I've heard like several different directors and people talk about it, but it's like more scarier to like make you imagine like what like the terrible monster creature could be besides showing you the terrible crazy
Yes,
monster.
but the dialogue wasn't good at making me imagine.
No, it
She's
wasn't.
literally just like, she never treated me the same.
Yeah.
And then that was it. So
Yes.
this was not that to
No,
me.
I understand, and I agree. I just think that's what they were trying to go for. That's what I was just
But
trying to
not
explain.
well.
No. Um but yeah, so they go for that, and I think that she does like they do show her character growth of her becoming um like trying to become a better version of herself, even though she doesn't change a whole lot in like the 2 or 3 days that they show it. I think it still shows her at least trying to become a better mother and person. But then it kind of just ends abruptly, which I didn't love. But
I
yeah,
didn't think it did a good job of that at all, actually.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So my take on it is, yeah, it started off really strong, where you're establishing that because the way that they established her as like a very grumpy person was excellent.
Yeah.
Like, literally, she was arguing with everybody she
Mhm.
ever even came into contact with. She has this screaming match at someone in a parking lot. She screams at someone for asking if she needed any help at a furniture store.
Yeah.
She screams at a cashier for not smiling at her.
Look
Like,
at you. Fix your face. Which
exactly.
which is a reference for every time we watch a movie, they show this like montage of all the different movies that we're watching.
And that's the clip from that movie is,
So
look at you, fix your face.
we literally have seen that clip at least 15 times
Yeah.
now.
Anyway, and then to make the movie successful, it would need to explain to me how someone can be that grumpy and that mean, because that's one of the like most grumpy mean people I've ever seen in a movie before. So I'm
Literally.
like, I need a reason, and I need a really strong reason for her to change, because that doesn't just happen easily and it doesn't get changed easily. And what I got was vague lines of dialogue and literally nothing.
Well, for me, it was
um
she visited her mother's grave site, which she apparently found her like dead and stuff. Um, and I think it was more of like that was kind of like the last straw for her and the last string, and like her behavior for that kind of applies to that because she keeps saying throughout the movie, even before then, that she's super tired and she's super anxious and super like always has to be doing something. And so then when her mother or her sister says like we loved you and we support you and stuff, and she just like breaks down, I think it's because like she was literally on her last legs, and then it's like this is her breaking point now, you know. And I think that was done well in my opinion of how it
I
was done.
just think it was very sloppy how they did it, because it was like she was like her sister was like, because literally she's screaming and then she cries at the grave, and then her acting is just like this for like the next half an hour of the movie.
Yeah.
And so finally her sister's like, what is your problem? And she like doesn't say anything, and so she's like, are you having like marriage problems? And she's like, I hate my family and they hate me. And she's like,
Hmm.
okay, then you should just leave them. And she's like, okay, whatever. And that was it. And I was like, so we're not gonna talk about the fact that you've been absolutely cruel to your family and that you drove your son to depression,
Yeah.
and like it implied that maybe her husband was kind of an asshole to her, but it never even shows it.
Besides the flower scene.
Then there's like a random flower scene. So her son, who is like driven so far into depression that he can barely speak to people
Even to his
because her mom
cousins
is
or
just
aunts.
constantly screaming at him. His mom is constantly screaming at him.
Yeah.
Um, he buys her Mother's Day flowers and doesn't even look at her because he can't stand her.
Well, not only that he
And
can't stand her, he's scared of her.
yeah. And then all she does is like start laughing, and then she cries
Yeah.
in response to the flowers, and then she goes back to not saying anything at all. And then she doesn't do anything with the flowers for like several hours, and then finally decides to cut them open and put them in a vase.
Hmm.
And then she walks away, and then the
Well, no,
husband
they got
immediately gets
home.
up and then
They got home
throws
and
them
she put them
away.
in there.
No, she didn't at first. She like went to bed and then got up and then took the flowers out.
Maybe.
And then the husband immediately gets up and throws them away. So it was like it was unclear if he was finally fed up or if the movie was trying to defend her by saying that he was also a monster.
I think it was
But
that he
it
was a
never
monster.
depicts him doing anything else unkind. He's just getting screamed at the entire movie. So it didn't do that effectively if it was trying to do that.
Yeah.
And then especially at the end he hurts his back at work and he's sitting there in pain, and his coworker goes up and tells her because she's just sleeping again, and he's like, your husband hurt his back at work, and she's just sitting there, and she like refuses to go down and check on him. And then that's how the movie ends, and it was supposed to be like, are they gonna get back together? And I'm like, what an asshole. He
Mhm.
hurt his back at work and you can't be bothered to go check on him. I was like, that is just unforgivable.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be like the peak of her character development. I was like, so she didn't change at all. She's still a really bad person.
Well, yeah, I think that for me, it was more of, is she going to just stay upstairs and like not change like she was before? Or is she gonna go downstairs and be like a better person like she would be? You know, like has she actually changed or has she not actually changed? And is still just an asshole and terrible person, you know?
Yeah, and the movie does not answer that.
No. It
Um,
leaves you on a cliffhanger.
cliffhanger. I did not really care.
He thought about it a lot on the way home, obviously.
Yeah. Anyway, I did not care for it at all. I was very disappointed. It built up such a good, because we all love like a really good story of like really awful, mean, grumpy person becomes nice at the end, right? Like
Mhm.
that's like the man Colado, like that's like that
Yeah.
kind of a story. And then it was not well done at all, in my opinion. It built up this great mean character and did just nothing. The entire second half of the movie is just people just sitting around crying with no explanation for why they're crying. And it's just like, are they just trying to win an Oscar and for acting and that's
Well,
it? That's
for
what it
me,
felt like. Is she was just like laugh,
well,
yell at people.
it was like they were
It's
all
just
at
like,
their breaking points and they were all already depressed.
but you
So
don't get to know why or how
mm,
or when, and you don't get to see them overcome it.
no, but that's yeah,
That's
that's
not
why they're
good.
crying though.
Okay.
I'm just
You shouldn't
saying.
have to fill in the blanks when they don't even give you any information to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, anyway. Also, why didn't they do anything with the son's character?
I don't know.
Like, literally, the movie starts with he's depressed and goes on walks by
Oh, you got
himself,
a
and people
girlfriend.
keep asking, "Where do you go on your walks?" And he's like, "Nowhere." And then they have one scene where he gets bullied while going on a walk,
Hmm.
and then the second to last scene in the entire movie is his mom still treats him like crap and never even bothered to thank him for the flowers.
No,
And
she
then,
did.
did she?
Yeah, well, she once she was done crying, she said, "Thank you, Moses."
Okay, so she very briefly thanks him, and then she thinks about knocking on his door,
Which
but then
was
decides not to and walks away.
well, that was a very big moment because they both like reacted very strongly to that. Because I don't think she's ever said thank you or anything nice to that
I
kid,
know, right?
because
Like
he was like, "Oh my
when
god,
it
that what was
happens,
that?"
right when it happens, it's like, oh, is she changing? And then she decides not to knock on his door. So it's like, no, she didn't change.
Mm-mm.
And then he goes on a walk by himself at the very end, and then a random girl says hi to him, and it's like, okay, so he got a girlfriend. We don't get to know why he was so depressed, if he ever got over being depressed, anything about where he's going on his walks, why he goes on walks. It was like setting up something, and then just nothing happened. And then it's like, do we really want to have nothing happen? He got a girlfriend, by the way. It's just like, okay, guys, like, oh my god, it was just not good. Um, anyway.
Mhm.
But yeah, I give it like a 2 out of 5. I was like, the acting at the start was so good, and then it just did nothing. It felt like a short film that got stretched to an hour and a half, and they had no idea what they were doing.
Mhm.
That's what it felt like to me.
That's
If that had
fair.
been a 30-minute short film where it was all of her like really mean scenes, and
Mhm.
then they go to the mother's grave, she cries, and then says thank you for the flowers, end of movie,
Sure.
that would have been a solid short film. But then it just got stretched into extra crying scenes
It did
and
feel dragged
nothing
out at the
else, and
end.
then just very abrupt ending.
It did feel dragged out at the end. but I still did enjoy
I don't
it.
think anyone in the entire audience thought it was gonna end, but it did. It was so
No,
random.
everyone was like,
What? We were like, did the movie cut out?
yeah.
Anyway, so fun times.
Hmm.
Hopefully, we get some better movies because I have not been impressed the last couple days. After a very strong start,
We did have a very strong start.
it has not been great since.
It's
So
okay.
hopefully, we get a good one today.
Yeah.
But
I think we
anyway,
ought to.
yeah,
We ought to
eventually.
deserve a good one.
Anyway, goodbye.
Goodbye.